The morning sun on Vesh 7 rose red and angry, casting long shadows across the failing colony. Claire Mitchell knelt beside the atmospheric processor, her hands covered in grease, her back aching from hours of work. The machine coughed and sputtered like a dying animal. She had tried everything, but without proper replacement parts, it was only a matter of time before it failed completely. "Claire, you need to come to the main hub," a voice crackled through her communication device. It was Governor Walsh, and he sounded terrible. "I'm in the middle of repairs," Claire replied, not looking up from her work. "Now, Claire. Everyone needs to be there. No exceptions." She wiped her hands on her already dirty work clothes and stood up slowly. Her knees protested. She was only 34 years old, but the harsh conditions on Vesh 7 made everyone feel ancient. Around her, the red dust plains stretched endlessly, broken only by the colony's scattered domes and machinery. The walk to the main hub took 15 minutes. Claire noticed other colonists moving in the same direction, their faces worried. Nobody spoke. They all knew something bad was coming. Bad news had become routine on Vesh 7, but this felt different. The main hub was packed with people. 300 colonists stood shoulder to shoulder, filling every available space. Children clung to their parents. Old people leaned against walls. Everyone looked scared. Governor Walsh climbed onto the elevated platform at the front. He was a good man, Claire thought. He had tried his best to keep the colony alive. But his best had not been enough. "Thank you all for coming," Walsh began. His voice shook slightly. "I have difficult news. The CRIN Consortium has invoked Clause 47B of our supply contract. Cultural asset recovery." A murmur ran through the crowd. Claire felt her stomach drop. She knew what Clause 47B meant. Everyone who had read the contract knew. They just never believed it would actually happen. "We owe them 800,000 universal credits," Walsh continued. "We cannot pay. The consortium is entitled to take compensation in the form of people." Someone screamed. Others began crying. Claire stood very still, her mind racing. This could not be happening. This was supposed to be a new beginning, a fresh start on a frontier world. Instead, it had become a nightmare. "They want 42 of us," Walsh said, his voice breaking. "The selection will be done by lottery. It is the only fair way. I am so sorry." The lottery ran on the main screen. It was automated, random, impossible to argue with. Names appeared one by one in glowing green letters. Each name brought a gasp or a sob from somewhere in the crowd. 20 names appeared. Then 30. Then 40. Claire watched, her heart pounding. Her name had not appeared yet. Maybe she would be spared. Maybe. "Claire Mitchell," the screen announced. Everything went quiet. Or maybe it was just the sound of blood rushing in her ears. Claire could not tell. She stood frozen, staring at her name on the screen. It glowed there, innocent and terrible. "No," she whispered. "Please no." But the computer did not care about please. The lottery was complete. 42 names glowed on the screen. 42 lives about to change forever. The next 72 hours passed in a blur. Claire returned to her small living quarters and sat on her bed, staring at the walls. She owned almost nothing. A few changes of clothes. Some books on a data pad. A photograph of her parents, both dead now. Her brother lived on Europa, too far away to help even if he could. She tried to send him a message, but the words would not come. What could she say? Goodbye? I am being sold to pay a debt? Take care of yourself? Everything sounded wrong. Other colonists came to say goodbye. They brought small gifts, extra food rations, a warm jacket, a letter of recommendation that meant nothing now. They cried. Claire did not cry. She felt hollow inside, like all her emotions had been scooped out. On the third day, the CRIN transport arrived. It was massive, dark gray, and covered with symbols Claire did not recognize. It landed in the colony's main port with a sound like thunder. 42 colonists gathered at the loading area. Some had families with them saying tearful goodbyes. Others stood alone like Claire. A few tried to run at the last moment, but security personnel caught them. There was nowhere to run on Vesh 7 anyway. The planet would kill you faster than the CRIN ever could. The CRIN official who processed them was tall, maybe 8 feet, with 4 arms and gray-blue skin. His eyes were black and showed no emotion whatsoever. He scanned each colonist with a handheld device, reading off information in a flat, mechanical voice. Lot 19. Human male. Construction worker. Minimum value, 2 universal credits. Lot 20. Basian female. Agricultural specialist. Minimum value, 3 universal credits. Lot 21. Human male. Medical assistant. Minimum value, 4 universal credits. Claire's turn came. Lot 23. Human female. Engineering background. Minimum value, 2 universal credits. 2 credits. Claire had once spent 3 credits on a decent meal at the colony cafeteria. She was worth less than a plate of synthetic protein and vegetables. A merchant stepped forward from the group of buyers. He was Kryn like the official but smaller and wearing expensive-looking clothes. 3 of his forearms held data pads. The 4th gestured dismissively at Claire. 2 credits, he said in heavily accented standard language. Minimum price. I am Torvak. The transaction took less than 30 seconds. Torvak transferred 2 universal credits to the consortium account. Claire's contract was transferred to his ownership. She was no longer a citizen of Earth or a colonist of Vesh 7. She was property. Move to holding area 3, the official instructed, pointing with one of his arms. Claire picked up her single bag and walked toward the transport ship. Behind her, she heard Walsh calling out, "I am sorry. I am so sorry." But she did not turn around. What was the point? The holding area inside the transport was divided by species. Humans in one section. Vrel in another. Thexians in a third. There were other species too, ones Claire had never seen before. They all wore the same expression, defeat. Claire found a seat in the corner and sat down. The ship's engines began to hum. Through a small window, she watched Vesh 7 grow smaller and smaller until it disappeared completely. Somewhere ahead, in the darkness of space, Nexus Prime waited. Her new life waited. A life worth exactly 2 universal credits. She closed her eyes and tried not to think about anything at all. The transport docked at Nexus Prime after 6 days of travel. Claire had barely eaten during the journey, her stomach too twisted with anxiety to accept food. Now, as she stepped off the ship and into the massive station, the sheer scale of everything overwhelmed her. The docking bay alone was larger than the entire Vesh 7 colony. Torvak led her through crowded corridors filled with dozens of species she had never seen before. Merchants shouted in languages she did not understand. Strange smells filled the air, some pleasant, others nauseating. Holographic advertisements flickered on every surface, advertising goods and services from across the galaxy. "Keep up," Torvak said without looking back. All 4 of his arms carried packages and data pads. He moved quickly and Claire struggled to follow while carrying her single bag. They took a transport tube to the residential sector. The crowds thinned here and the corridors became cleaner and quieter. Torvak's compound was located in a wealthy area, marked by a heavy security door that scanned his biometrics before opening. Inside, Claire stopped and stared. The space was enormous. High ceilings. Expensive furniture. Real plants growing in carefully maintained gardens under artificial sunlight. She had lived in a metal box on Vesh 7 for 3 years. This looked like something from a dream. "You will meet the others," Torvak said, gesturing for her to follow. "They will explain the household rules." 3 beings waited in the main living area. The first was Vrel, with green scaly skin and large golden eyes. She stood about 5 feet tall and wore a simple but elegant robe. The second was the Sien, humanoid but with silver skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. The third was Porian, covered in soft fur and possessing 6 limbs. All 3 watched Claire with expressions she could not quite read. "This is Senna," Torvak said, pointing to the Vrel. "She manages the gardens. This is Lyra," pointing to the Sien. "She handles my business correspondence. And this is Mira," pointing to the Porian. "She creates art for my collection. They will teach you what you need to know." Then Torvak left. Just like that. He walked out of the room and disappeared down a hallway, leaving Claire standing there with her bag in her confusion. "Welcome," Senna said softly. Her voice was surprisingly gentle. "You must be exhausted. Come, we will show you your room." Claire's room was larger than her entire living space on Vesh 7. It had a real bed, a private bathroom, and a window overlooking one of the station's interior gardens. She set down her bag and sat on the edge of the bed, feeling dizzy. "The contract wife arrangement is not what you probably think," Lyra explained, sitting down in a chair near the window. "Torvak is not interested in romance or anything like that. He collects us because it shows his wealth and status. We are like expensive decorations." "What are my duties?" Claire asked, her voice hoarse. "You will attend social events with him sometimes," Senna said. "Stand quietly, look presentable, smile when appropriate. You will help manage household systems since you have engineering knowledge. Beyond that, your time is your own." Claire blinked. "My own?" "Torvak travels frequently for business. Lyra continued. He is gone weeks at a time. When he is here he mostly ignores us. As long as the household runs smoothly and we appear when summoned, he does not care what we do. Mira the Porian had not spoken at all. She simply watched Claire with large, sad eyes. The first week passed strangely. Claire attended one formal dinner where Torvak showed her off to other merchants. She wore clothes provided by the household, stood silently while aliens discussed trade routes and profit margins, and then returned to her room. The rest of the time she wandered the compound, learning its layout and routines. The compound had everything. Commercial-grade food synthesizers, medical equipment, exercise facilities, and most impressive of all, a massive digital library that contained more information than Claire had ever imagined existed. She discovered the library on her 8th day. It occupied an entire room with holographic displays floating in the air and multiple access terminals. Claire approached one terminal hesitantly and activated it. "Welcome," the system said in standard language. "Please state your information request." What can I access?" Claire asked. "All standard public databases. Torvak's personal collection includes commercial law, trade regulations, art history, botanical sciences, and consortium legal codes." "What is your area of interest?" Claire thought for a moment. Consortium legal codes. The display filled with thousands of documents. Regulations, treaties, court decisions. Laws governing everything from trade disputes to sentient rights. Claire stared at the sheer volume of information. She began reading that day and did not stop. Every morning she completed her minimal household duties. Every afternoon she disappeared into the library. The legal codes were written in dense, complicated language, but Claire's engineering training had taught her how to analyze complex systems. And that was what laws were, systems of rules that connected and interacted. Senna found her there one evening, 3 weeks after her arrival. Claire was so absorbed in a document about indenture contracts that she did not notice the Vrel approach. "You have been reading for 11 hours, Senna said quietly. Claire looked up, her eyes burning. "Did you know that consortium law requires all indenture contracts to include mandatory rest periods? 20 hours per standard week. We are supposed to get breaks." Senna's expression did not change. "Torvak does not enforce such things." "But the law says." "The law says many things," Senna interrupted gently. "Nobody enforces them for people like us. We are contract wives. We are property. The laws do not really apply to us." Claire looked back at the screen. "They should." "Should and do are different things," Senna said. "Come eat something. You will make yourself sick." But Claire could not stop. The more she read, the more she discovered. Contradictions. Loopholes. Provisions that seemed designed to protect indentured beings but were never actually enforced. Her engineering mind recognized patterns in the chaos. One night she found something interesting. Provision 19.4.7 stated that all indentured beings were entitled to reasonable professional development opportunities relevant to their designated skills and future reintegration into society. Professional development. That meant education, training, access to resources. Claire read the provision 20 times, making sure she understood it correctly. Then she cross-referenced it with other regulations. The provision had been added to Consortium Law 47 years ago as part of a reform package. It had never been repealed. It was still active. Lyra found her in the library the next morning, still reading. "You did not sleep." "Look at this," Claire said, pointing to the screen. "This provision. It means we are legally entitled to educational access. Torvak has to provide it if we request it formally." Lyra read the provision carefully. Her silver skin shimmered slightly. This could be real. It is real. It is in the active legal code. But will Torvak honor it? Claire smiled for the first time since leaving Vesh 7. "He has to. If he refuses, we can file a formal complaint. And if we file a complaint, he could lose his merchant license. Bad publicity. Legal trouble. He cares about his reputation." Lyra sat down slowly. "What are you planning?" "I am going to learn everything," Claire said. "Every law. Every regulation. Every contradiction. I am going to understand this system better than the people who created it." "Why?" Claire looked at the Visien. "Because systems have rules. And if you understand the rules well enough, you can find the weaknesses. I am an engineer, Lyra. This is just another machine. And every machine can be taken apart." Mira appeared in the doorway. She had been listening. For the first time she spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Can you really help us?" Claire did not answer immediately. She looked at the three of them, Senna, Lyra, and Mira. All bought and paid for. All trapped. All resigned to their fate. I do not know, Claire said honestly. But I am going to try. Claire spent 8 months buried in legal codes before she made her move. 8 months of reading until her eyes ached. 8 months of cross-referencing provisions and memorizing case law. 8 months of building her argument piece by piece, like assembling a machine from scattered parts. She drafted the petition on a quiet Tuesday morning when Torvak was away on business. Her hands shook slightly as she typed the formal request. Everything had to be perfect. One mistake, one wrong word, and Torvak could dismiss it entirely. To Torvak, Merchant Lord of House Torvak, she wrote. Under Provision 19.4.7 of the Consortium Legal Code, I formally request access to advanced legal education materials and consultation services as part of my entitled professional development opportunities. This provision applies to all indentured beings and requires compliance within 30 standard days of formal request. Respectfully submitted, Claire Mitchell, Contract Wife, Registration Number 7734B. She read it 50 times. Then she transmitted it through the household's official communication system, creating a legal record that could not be erased or ignored. Torvak returned 3 days later. He summoned Claire to his office immediately. The office was intimidating, filled with expensive artifacts and holographic displays showing his various business ventures. Torvak sat behind a massive desk, all 4 arms folded across his chest. His black eyes stared at Claire without blinking. "What is this?" he asked, gesturing at a holographic copy of her petition floating in the air. "A formal request under Provision 19.4.7, Claire said. Her voice was steady, though her heart pounded. "I am entitled to professional development opportunities. You are a contract wife. You manage household systems. You need no further education. The provision does not specify what type of education. It only requires that you provide reasonable access to professional development. Legal education is a recognized professional field." Torvak's skin darkened slightly, a sign of anger in Kryn physiology. "You dare quote law to me?" "I am not being disrespectful," Claire said carefully. "I am simply exercising my legal rights. If you prefer, we can submit this to the Consortium Labor Board for review. They will determine if my request is reasonable." The threat was subtle but real. Labor Board reviews meant inspections. Questions. Scrutiny of all his contracts and business practices. Merchants like Torvak avoided such attention. "I will consult my legal advisor," Torvak said coldly. "You are dismissed." Claire left the office on shaking legs. Senna, Lyra, and Mira waited for her in the hallway, their faces worried. "What happened?" Lyra whispered. "We wait," Claire said. "Either he complies or he faces a review. Either way, we learn something useful." 2 weeks passed. Claire continued her reading, but now she felt Torvak watching her more carefully. He would appear in the library doorway sometimes, just standing there, observing. She ignored him and kept working. Finally, Torvak's legal advisor requested a meeting. Her name was Kelrix, a Vrel male with dark green scales and intelligent eyes. He arrived at the compound carrying a data pad and wearing formal legal robes. Claire, Torvak, and Kelrix met in the office. Kelrix reviewed Claire's petition on his data pad, his expression thoughtful. "The human is correct," Kelrix said finally. "Provision 19.4.7 does entitle her to professional development access. The provision was added 47 years ago and remains active in consortium law. Refusal to comply could result in penalties." Torvak's forearms tensed. "This is absurd. She is trying to abuse a technicality." "Perhaps," Kelrix said. "But it is a legal technicality. If she files a complaint and the labor board sides with her, you could face fines of up to 50,000 credits. Possibly more if they investigate your other contracts." The room fell silent. Claire watched Torvak's face carefully. She could see him calculating, weighing options, considering risks. "What exactly do you want?" Torvak asked Claire finally. "Access to advanced legal databases," Claire said. "Permission to consult with legal professionals. Access to case law archives and educational materials. Nothing that costs you significant money. Just access." Kelrix nodded slowly. "These are reasonable requests. The databases are already available through standard subscription services. Consultation can be provided remotely. The cost would be minimal." Torvak stared at Claire for a long moment. "Fine. You will have your access. But do not think this changes anything. You are still contract bound to this household." "I understand," Claire said. Thank you for complying with consortium law. The words were respectful, but everyone in the room heard the real message. I beat you using your own rules. Within a week, Claire had full access to professional legal databases. She could contact legal consultants across Nexus Prime. She could access court records and case files. It was more than she had hoped for. She studied harder than ever. 14 hours a day sometimes. Her eyes grew bloodshot. She lost weight. Senna brought her food and forced her to eat. Lyra helped her organize notes and cross-references. Even Mira contributed, using her artistic skills to create visual diagrams of how different laws connected. 3 months after gaining legal access, Claire went to the market for the first time. Torvak needed her to pick up supplies for an upcoming social event. She took a transport tube to the commercial district, a massive area filled with shops and vendors from 100 different worlds. At the supply shop, she met a Thesian woman named Cora. Cora worked as an indentured clerk, processing purchases for the shop owner. She looked exhausted and moved slowly, favoring her left side. Are you hurt? Claire asked while Cora scanned her items. Cora glanced around nervously. I fell. My owner says I am clumsy. I need medical attention, but he says it costs too much. Claire paused. Under Provision 12.8, indentured beings are entitled to basic medical care for work-related injuries. Your owner is required to provide treatment. Cora stared at her. What? Provision 12.8 of the Consortium Labor Code. If you were injured while working, your owner must provide medical care. It is not optional. I did not know that. Most people do not, Claire said quietly. But it is in the law. You could file a complaint. Cora's hands trembled. He would punish me. He would sell my contract to someone worse. Not if you file properly through official channels. Once a complaint is registered, retaliation is illegal under Provision 15.3. He could lose his business license. Claire spent 20 minutes explaining the process to Cora. How to file. What to say. Which office to contact. Cora listened with wide eyes as if Claire was describing magic rather than simple legal procedures. Why are you helping me? Cora asked finally. Because someone should, Claire said. And because these laws exist for a reason. We just need to use them. Word spread quickly. Claire did not realize how quickly until she returned to the market 2 weeks later. 3 indentured beings approached her, asking quiet questions about their contracts. Then 5 more. Then a dozen. She met them in quiet corners of the market, speaking in low voices, explaining provisions and protections they never knew existed. She told a Porian janitor about mandatory rest periods. She explained wage protection laws to a human construction worker. She showed a Vrel cook how to file complaints about unsafe working conditions. Each conversation was brief and careful. Everyone was afraid of being caught. But the information spread anyway, passed from servant to servant, from indentured being to indentured being, like whispers moving through the dark. At the compound, Lyra organized the information Claire gathered. She created lists of common problems and corresponding legal solutions. Senna used her botanical knowledge to understand complex language and simplify it. Mira drew simple diagrams that anyone could understand, regardless of their language or education level. They became a team without planning to. For contract wives working secretly to undermine the system that owned them. One evening, Kelrix appeared at the compound unexpectedly. He asked to speak with Claire privately. She met him in the library, her heart racing. I know what you are doing at the market, Kelrix said. Claire's mouth went dry. I am not breaking any laws. No, you are not, Kelrix agreed. That is what makes it so clever. You are simply sharing information about existing legal protections. Nothing illegal about that. Then why are you here? Kelrix smiled slightly. Because I think you are going to need this. He handed her a data chip. Court records from the past 20 years. Cases involving indenture law. Many were settled quietly, sealed from public access. These copies, officially they do not exist. Claire stared at the chip. Why would you help me? Because I have been a legal advisor for 30 years, Kelrix said. I have watched merchants abuse these contracts. I have read provisions meant to protect beings like you, and I have watched those protections ignored. Someone should actually use the law as it was written. Might as well be you. He left without another word. Claire inserted the chip into the library terminal. Thousands of files appeared. Case after case of indentured beings challenging their contracts. Some won. Many lost. But the patterns were there, clear as mathematical equations. Claire read through the night. By morning, she understood exactly what she needed to do next. She was going to challenge her own contract. And she was going to win. Claire filed her petition on a cold morning when the station's environmental systems were undergoing maintenance. The temperature had dropped several degrees, and everyone moved through the corridors wrapped in extra layers. Claire wore her best clothes, carried a data pad loaded with evidence, and walked toward the consortium equity courts with steady determination. The court building was massive and intimidating, built from dark stone imported from some distant world. Hundreds of beings moved through its halls, lawyers, clerks, petitioners, observers. Claire felt small and insignificant among them, but she pushed forward anyway. The filing office was located on the 3rd level. A bored-looking Sienne clerk sat behind a transparent barrier, processing requests with mechanical efficiency. Petition type? The clerk asked without looking up. Contract dispute. Indenture law, Claire said. Now the clerk looked up. His silver eyes narrowed. You are filing against your own contract? Yes. Do you have legal representation? I am representing myself. The clerk's expression shifted to something like pity. You understand that self-representation significantly reduces your chances of success? The consortium employs the best legal minds in the galaxy. I understand, Claire said. I still want to file. The clerk processed her petition, scanning the documents Claire had prepared. His eyes widened slightly as he read. You are claiming improper species classification? That is ambitious. It is accurate, Claire corrected. The petition was accepted. Claire received a case number and a court date 6 weeks away. 6 weeks to prepare. 6 weeks before everything would either change or collapse. She returned to Torvak's compound and told the others immediately. Senna looked worried. Lyra looked excited. Mira simply nodded as if she had expected this all along. Torvak will be furious, Senna said quietly. Torvak already knows, Claire replied. The court system automatically notifies contract holders when petitions are filed. He probably received the alert an hour ago. Torvak summoned her that evening. His office felt colder than usual and his forearms were rigid with anger. You are challenging your contract, he said. It was not a question. Yes. On what grounds? Improper species classification. Under the Sentient Rights Act of 2577, all beings sold into indenture must undergo proper classification assessments to determine appropriate treatment standards. Humans were never assessed. We were simply assigned a minimum classification and sold in bulk. Torvak's black eyes glittered dangerously. That act applies to new species entering consortium space. Humans have been known for decades. Known but not properly classified, Claire countered. Earth's first contact was handled through emergency protocols during a crisis situation. The proper classification process was skipped. Every human sold since then has been sold under invalid legal authority. This is ridiculous. The courts will dismiss it immediately. Perhaps, Claire said calmly. Or perhaps they will examine the evidence and realize that thousands of contracts are legally questionable. Either way, we will find out in 6 weeks. She left before he could respond. Her hands shook once she was safely back in her room, but she felt a strange sense of freedom. The move was made. There was no going back now. The next 6 weeks were brutal. Claire prepared obsessively, reviewing every aspect of her case. Calrix visited twice more, bringing additional case files and offering quiet advice. He never admitted to helping her officially, but his guidance was invaluable. The key is proving that the classification process was legally required and was deliberately skipped, Calrix explained during one visit. If you can show intentional avoidance, the court must take action. Claire dug deeper into Earth's first contact records. She found the emergency protocols that had been invoked. She found communications between consortium officials discussing how to bypass standard procedures to accelerate trade agreements. She found evidence of predatory lending practices designed to create debt that Earth's colonies could never realistically repay. The picture became clear. Earth had been set up. The debt crisis was engineered. The indenture sales were planned from the beginning. Lyra helped organize everything into a coherent presentation. Mira created visual aids that made complex legal arguments understandable at a glance. Senna made sure Claire ate and slept even when she did not want to. The court date arrived. Claire wore simple but professional clothes. She carried her data pad and a physical folder of printed documents. Redundancy in case of technical failures. She arrived early and sat in the waiting area, watching other cases proceed through the system. Most petitioners had lawyers. Expensive ones, judging by their clothes and manner. Claire sat alone, going over her notes one final time. Case 47839B, a voice announced. Mitchell vs. House Torvak. Proceed to courtroom 7. Claire stood and walked through the massive doors. The courtroom was circular, with the judge's platform elevated in the center. Seating surrounded it in concentric rings. Torvak sat on one side with 3 lawyers. Claire sat on the other side alone. The judge was a Kryn female named Voshara, known for being strict but fair. She reviewed the case files on her display, her 4 arms moving rapidly across multiple data pads. This is unusual, Voshara said finally. A self-represented contract wife challenging the legal foundation of her indenture. Explain your position, petitioner. Claire stood. Her voice was clear and steady. Your Honor, I argue that my indenture contract is invalid because humans were never properly classified under the Sentient Rights Act of 2577. This act requires comprehensive assessment of new species' physical, psychological, and cultural characteristics before any binding contracts can be established. This assessment never occurred for humans. Torvak's lead lawyer, a tall Visian named Vorsh, stood immediately. Your Honor, humans have been part of consortium interactions for over 40 years. They are not a new species. First contact occurred 43 years ago, Claire acknowledged. But proper classification procedures were bypassed using emergency protocols. Those protocols were designed for temporary situations, not permanent legal frameworks. Every human contract since then has been based on incomplete and legally insufficient data. She activated her data pad. Holographic displays appeared in the air, showing the emergency protocols, the timeline of Earth's integration, and the conspicuous absence of classification assessments. Furthermore, Claire continued, I have evidence that this bypass was intentional. Consortium officials knew that proper classification would reveal humans as more resilient, intelligent, and adaptable than the minimum classification assigned. This would have increased our value significantly and made the debt indenture scheme less profitable. She displayed communications between consortium officials. The words were damning: delay classification, minimize assessment scope, maximize debt leverage before full integration. The courtroom went quiet. Even Torvak's lawyers looked uncomfortable. Voshara leaned forward. These are serious allegations, petitioner. You are suggesting coordinated fraud at the institutional level. I am suggesting that procedures were not followed, Claire said carefully. Whether that constitutes fraud is for this court to determine. I simply argue that without proper classification, my contract lacks legal foundation. Vorsh attempted to counter. He argued about precedent, about the practical impossibility of reviewing thousands of contracts, about the chaos that would result. But his arguments sounded weak compared to Claire's documented evidence. The hearing lasted 4 hours. Claire presented case after case of similar situations where improper classification had invalidated contracts. She showed how the Sentient Rights Act had been applied to other species. She demonstrated the clear paper trail of avoidance and manipulation. Finally, Voshara called for a recess. This court will review the evidence and issue a preliminary ruling within 10 standard days. The petitioner has raised substantial questions that require careful consideration. Claire returned to the compound exhausted. Senna had prepared food. Lyra had organized news feeds. Word of the case was already spreading through legal networks. Mira simply sat with her, offering silent support. You did well, Kelrick said. He had watched from the public gallery. Very well. Voshara looked troubled. That is a good sign. 10 days felt like 10 years. Claire could not focus on anything. She paced the compound, reviewed her arguments constantly, and barely slept. On the 10th day, the court's decision arrived. Claire opened the message with shaking hands. Preliminary ruling in case 47839B. The petitioner has established sufficient evidence of procedural irregularities in human species classification. This court orders a comprehensive review of all human indenture contracts currently active within consortium space. All such contracts are hereby frozen pending verification of proper classification procedures. Contract holders may not transfer, sell, or significantly alter terms until review is complete. Full ruling to follow within 90 standard days. Claire read it 3 times to make sure she understood. Then she started laughing. Or maybe crying. Possibly both. Lyra grabbed her shoulders. What does it mean? It means we won, Claire said. Not completely. Not yet. But we won the first battle. Every human contract in consortium space is now under review. Thousands of them. They have to prove the contracts are valid. The burden of proof shifted to them. Word spread through Nexus Prime within hours. Merchant guilds scrambled to review their contracts. Legal firms were overwhelmed with requests. Human indentured beings across the station began asking questions, demanding information, filing their own petitions. Torvak appeared in the library that evening. He looked older, somehow diminished. "You have created chaos," he said quietly. "I have created accountability," Claire corrected. "There is a difference. What do you want? Money? Better conditions? I can arrange." "I want nothing from you," Claire interrupted. "I want what the law already promises. Fair treatment. Proper classification. Legal compliance. That is all." Torvak left without another word. Claire turned back to her work. The preliminary ruling was just the beginning. The real fight was just starting. But for the first time since leaving Vesh 7, Claire felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. The final ruling came on a bright morning exactly 93 days after the preliminary decision. Claire sat in the courtroom with Senna, Lyra, and Mira beside her. The gallery was packed with observers, journalists, legal scholars, merchant representatives, and dozens of indentured beings who had traveled from across Nexus Prime to witness the outcome. Judge Voshara entered precisely on time. Her 4 arms carried multiple data pads, and her expression was unreadable. The room fell completely silent. "This court has completed its comprehensive review of Case 47839B, Voshara began. "The evidence presented is overwhelming and disturbing. Humans were indeed sold into indenture without proper species classification as required by the Sentient Rights Act of 2577. Furthermore, this court has uncovered systematic violations of established protocols designed to protect sentient beings entering consortium space." Claire felt Lyra grip her hand tightly. "The petitioner's contract with House Torvak is hereby declared legally invalid," Voshara continued. "Additionally, this court finds that all human indenture contracts established under the same flawed classification system are similarly invalid. Approximately 4,217 contracts are affected by this ruling." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Torvak, sitting with his lawyers, looked like he had been struck. "Contract holders are entitled to compensation for breach of contract," Voshara said. "However, given the systematic nature of the violations and the contract holder's failure to ensure legal compliance, compensation is limited to 50% of original contract value. All affected indentured beings are hereby released from their contracts effective immediately." The courtroom erupted. Some people cheered. Others shouted in protest. Voshara's gavel struck 3 times, demanding order. Furthermore, Voshara said once silence returned, "The petitioner, Claire Mitchell, is awarded the property and assets of House Torvak as compensation for wrongful indenture and for exposing systematic legal violations. This includes Torvak's compound on Nexus Prime and associated financial holdings." Claire's mind went blank. She could not have heard that correctly. The compound? Everything? Torvak stood, all 4 arms gesturing wildly. "Your Honor, this is excessive. My entire business." "Your entire business was built on illegal contracts," Voshara interrupted coldly. "You knowingly participated in a system designed to exploit legal loopholes and procedural failures. The law is clear. When systematic fraud is proven, assets may be transferred to the injured party. This court finds such transfer appropriate in this case. The ruling is final." Torvak collapsed back into his seat, his skin turning an ashen gray. Claire walked out of the courtroom in a daze. Reporters swarmed her immediately, shouting questions in multiple languages. Security personnel had to escort her through the crowd. Senna, Lyra, and Mira stayed close, forming a protective barrier around her. They returned to the compound, Claire's compound now, and sat in the main living area in stunned silence. "What just happened?" Claire finally asked. "You won," Kelrick said. He had followed them back and now stood in the doorway. "You won everything. The case, the precedent, the property, the future. You just changed the entire consortium legal system. I did not want his compound. I just wanted freedom. You got both," Kelrick said. "And now you have resources to help others get theirs. What are you going to do with it?" Claire looked around at the enormous space, the expensive furniture, the digital library where she had spent countless hours learning to fight back. An idea began forming in her mind. "We are going to help them," she said slowly. "All of them. Every indentured being who needs legal help. We are going to create a network." Within a week, Claire had transformed Torvak's compound into the Indenture Rights Advocacy Network headquarters. The luxury furniture was removed and replaced with workstations. The entertainment areas became meeting rooms. The library expanded to include legal resources in 30 different languages. Senna managed the gardens but also handled logistics and scheduling. Lyra became the chief administrative officer, organizing case files and tracking legal proceedings. Mira created educational materials, simple visual guides explaining legal rights in ways anyone could understand, regardless of education level. Kelrix resigned from his position as a private legal advisor and joined them full-time. Other lawyers followed, drawn by the precedent-setting nature of the work. Within 3 months they had a staff of 17. The first clients arrived nervous and afraid. A Vrel janitor who had worked 18-hour days for 2 years. A human construction worker whose owner had withheld medical care. A Porian cook who had been beaten for minor mistakes. Claire met with each one personally, listening to their stories, reviewing their contracts, explaining their options. "You are not alone," she told them. "The law is on your side. We just need to make people follow it." The work was exhausting. Some cases were straightforward, clear violations of established law. Others were complicated, requiring creative legal arguments and extensive research. Claire worked 16-hour days reviewing contracts, drafting petitions, sometimes representing clients in court herself. Word spread rapidly. Indentured beings from across Nexus Prime came seeking help. Then beings from other stations started arriving. Then from entire planets. The network could barely keep up with the demand. Claire hired more staff. She established regional offices on 6 major stations. She created training programs to teach indentured beings how to advocate for themselves. She published guides, hosted workshops, and appeared on news programs explaining how the legal system actually worked. Merchant guilds fought back. They hired expensive lawyers to challenge every case. They lobbied for new laws to protect their interests. They tried to discredit Claire personally, calling her an agitator and a troublemaker. But the momentum was unstoppable. Every case Claire won created new precedent. Every freed being told 10 others. Every victory inspired 100 more challenges. 1 year after the ruling, Claire stood in a packed assembly hall on Nexus Prime. Over 3,000 beings filled the space. Former contract wives, indentured laborers, freed servants, and their families. She had been invited to speak about the network's first-year achievements. "When I was sold for 2 credits, Claire began, her voice carrying through the hall, "I thought my life was over. I thought I was powerless. But I learned something important. Systems have rules. And if you understand the rules well enough, you can use them to create change." She displayed statistics on the screens behind her. In 1 year, the Indenture Rights Advocacy Network has helped 5,342 beings challenge unlawful contracts. 4,907 of those challenges were successful. That is a 92% success rate. The crowd erupted in applause. Claire waited for silence before continuing. But numbers only tell part of the story. Behind each case is a person who refused to accept injustice. A person who believed they deserved better. A person who was brave enough to fight back using the law instead of violence. She paused, looking across the sea of faces. "We are not done. There are still thousands of beings trapped in unlawful contracts. There are still merchants who think they can abuse the system. There is still work to do. But we are winning. Slowly, carefully, legally, we are winning. And we will continue winning until every being in consortium space has the freedom and dignity they deserve." The applause was deafening. Claire stepped down from the platform and immediately disappeared into the crowd, answering questions, listening to new cases, offering encouragement. Kelrix found her an hour later, surrounded by a group of newly freed Thexians who were asking about employment opportunities. "You need to rest," Kelrix said. "You look exhausted." "I will rest when the work is done," Claire replied. "The work will never be done. There will always be another case, another person who needs help." Claire smiled. "Then I guess I will rest when I am dead." 2 years after the ruling, the network had expanded to 47 locations across consortium space. Claire traveled constantly, visiting regional offices, training new advocates, representing clients in landmark cases. She had become famous, or infamous depending on who you asked. Earth's government contacted her, offering official recognition and support. She accepted but kept the network independent. Governments changed. Laws changed. Independence meant survival. She returned to Vesh 7 once, 2 years after leaving. The colony had transformed. With fair trade agreements and proper legal protections, it was thriving. The atmospheric processors worked perfectly. New buildings were under construction. The red dust no longer seemed quite so oppressive. Governor Walsh met her at the landing pad, tears in his eyes. "You saved us," he said. "Not just those who were sold. All of us. You gave us our dignity back." Claire looked around at the bustling colony. "I just used the law the way it was supposed to be used. That is all." She recruited 5 new advocates from Vesh 7 before leaving. Young people who remembered the lottery, who understood what it meant to be powerless, who wanted to make sure it never happened again. The compound on Nexus Prime was always busy now. Day and night, beings came seeking help. The staff worked in rotating shifts. The digital library had expanded to fill 3 entire rooms. The garden Senna maintained had become a peaceful refuge where stressed advocates could rest between cases. Claire still lived there in her original room. She had refused to move into Torvak's former master suite. That felt wrong somehow. Her room was simple, functional, and filled with data pads and legal documents. Late one night, she sat in the library reviewing a particularly difficult case. Mira appeared in the doorway carrying 2 cups of tea. "You should sleep," Mira said softly. She spoke more now than she had in the beginning, but she was still quiet by nature. "After I finish this," Claire said. Mira sat down beside her. "Do you ever regret it? Fighting back? It would have been easier to just accept your situation." Claire considered the question seriously. "Easier maybe. But I would have died inside. This way at least I am alive. Actually alive, not just existing." "You changed everything," Mira said. "For all of us." "We changed everything," Claire corrected. "This was never just me. It was you, Senna, Lyra, Calrix, everyone who believed the system could be better." Mira smiled. "Still, it started with you. With 2 credits and a woman who refused to accept that was all she was worth." Claire looked around the library thinking about how far they had come. From captivity to freedom. From helplessness to power. From isolation to community. "I was never worth 2 credits, Claire said quietly. "None of us were. We were always worth more. We just needed to prove it." She returned to her work, and Mira sat beside her in comfortable silence. Outside, Nexus Prime hummed with life. And somewhere out there, another indentured being was learning about their rights, filing their first petition, taking their first step toward freedom. The revolution continued, one case at a time.